LinkedIn presents.
The changes that a person goes through in new parenthood are dramatic and profound and long-lasting. They are not a fixed pattern of behavior. They develop over time out of the brains we already have, with all the strengths and challenges that come with it. And they are not distinctly female.
Happy Wednesday, friends. I'm Michael Kovnat, and this is the Next Big Idea Daily, quick masterclasses from the best new books written and read by the authors themselves. Don't forget to hit follow in your podcast player and sign up for our newsletter using the link in the episode notes. So, have you heard of mommy brain? It's a lighthearted term often used to describe the foggy, disoriented state that many new moms experience in the early days of parenting. But behind the jokes lies a fascinating scientific truth. In Mother Brain, How Neuroscience is Rewriting the Story of Parenthood, health and science journalist Chelsea Conaboy delves into groundbreaking research that upends myths about mommy brain and the so-called maternal instinct. Her book reveals how parenting reshapes the brain, not just for mothers, but for fathers and other caregivers as well. Chelsea's going to share 5 key insights right after this quick break.
Hey you! I'm Andrew Seaman. Do you want a new job? Or do you want to move forward in your career? Well, you should listen to my weekly show called Get Hired with Andrew Seaman. We talk about it all, and it's waiting for you, yes you, wherever you get your podcasts.
Have you been feeling the effects of stress, burnout, or anxiety at work? Listen to the Anxious Achiever podcast to rethink the relationship between your career and your mental health. Get the Anxious Achiever wherever you find your podcasts and walk away with practical advice you can implement today.
We often think about love as the thing that compels a parent to care for their child. But from an evolutionary perspective, love may not be enough. Love is neither universally reliable nor automatic. Feelings of ambivalence in the first days and weeks postpartum are common. At the very start, the adaptive parental brain does not rely entirely on love, or at least not the version of it we may know. Its first mission is to capture and to keep a parent's attention. In the early postpartum period, changes in the brain propel us into a state of hyper-responsiveness. We talk a lot about the dramatic shifts in hormones that come with pregnancy, but that talk typically ends with the baby blues and the idea that, for most people, things settle out. In reality, this flood of hormones primes the brain for a period of plasticity or malleability, so that babies, acutely powerful stimuli with their potent cries and coos and cuddles, can go to work. Brain regions related to motivation, vigilance, and meaning-making increase in activity and connectivity. In the early postpartum period, this responsiveness can feel intense and deliberately colored by worry. We are driven to pay attention to our babies, to respond to their needs, to try and try again to meet them, and to adjust quickly when we don't. It's thought that over time, things shift to a more regulated state. Parents fine-tune their ability to recognize a child's cues and predict their needs. Regions of the brain involved in self-regulation and in reading and responding to another person's mental state and emotions change in function and in structure. One researcher described it to me as if the neural networks that support our ability to understand ourselves and to predict our own needs in a social context are essentially extended to encompass our child's needs too. This is a process that unfolds over time, one that is fueled at the start by attention. And it's something I wish I had understood when I was a brand new mother, full of worry about my son's growth and well-being, about his safety, about the weight of caring for him for years to come. I was worried, too, about the worry itself. as if it was crowding out the warmth and certainty I had expected to feel. Learning about the parental brain helped calm those fears. I wasn't failing him somehow, I was changing. I was in the middle of the most profound neurobiological upheaval of my adult life, through which I was becoming the mother my son needed me to be. The great poet Mary Oliver urged us to bring children to the woods and stand them in the stream, to plant in them a love of nature. Attention, she wrote, is the beginning of devotion. This is true in parenthood, too. Attention is the beginning of devotion. Frame those words. Hang them over the bassinet. Every parent is changed by caregiving, not only gestational mothers. Two important things seem to shape the parental brain: shifts in hormones and experience, specifically time spent directly caring for a child. This is true for all parents, not only those who give birth to their children. Fathers experience significant changes in hormones, including testosterone, prolactin, and oxytocin, as they approach fatherhood and as they engage with their children. It's thought that foster and adoptive parents also experience hormonal changes. And a growing body of research has found changes in the activity and structure of fathers' brains, in some cases regardless of whether they are biologically related to their children. One key study by researchers in Israel, including Eyal Abraham and Ruth Feldman, looked at two groups of couples: biological mothers and fathers, and gay fathers, half of whom were biologically related to their children. Across all parents, the researchers found generally consistent activation of what they called a global parental caregiving neural network, with some notable differences. In the different sex couples, the mothers showed greater activation of the amygdala, a key parenting region, than the fathers. But the amygdala activation in the primary caregiving gay fathers was quite similar to the mothers. And there was a kind of dose effect in fathers. Across all fathers in the study, the more time the men spent in direct care of their infants, the greater connectivity they showed between the amygdala and a cortical brain region thought to be important for social cognition. Just published research by scientists in Spain and the United States, including Magdalena Martinez Garcia and Darby Saxby, followed men over time, taking brain scans before and during their partner's pregnancy, and again within the first months of fatherhood. They found significant structural changes. Specifically, the fathers showed reductions in the volume of brain regions associated with social understanding. It's important to understand that this kind of volume loss has generally been associated with a fine-tuning of neural networks, not a loss in function, perhaps just the opposite. The overwhelming majority of research on the parental brain is in cisgender gestational mothers. That's changing, but slowly. What findings we have so far point to the fact that the mechanisms for change between gestational and non-gestational parents are different, of course, but the results can be remarkably similar. This fact is rooted in the evolutionary history of humans. Human babies have always relied on adults other than their mothers to care for them some of the time. It may be that those helpers for early humans most often were grandmothers, living slightly past their own reproductive years, supporting their daughters as they had babies in closer succession, and increasing the chance of their own long-living extra-social genes being passed on. Kristen Hawkes is a leading researcher on this idea, often referred to as the grandmother hypothesis. She told me that those hardworking grandmothers essentially swung open the door to alloparenting in humans, or the practice of caring for children you did not birth yourself. Allo coming from the Greek word for other. Historically, we have really underestimated who gets to do this, whose biology determines them to be really good caregivers. The parental brain science shows us that the answer is anyone. Anyone who commits their time and energy, their attention, to caring for their babies. No, motherhood does not make us dumber. So often when I told friends or strangers that I was writing a book about the parental brain, the response I got was some variation on, "Oh, you mean how my children fried my brain cells?" I heard this even from smart, capable, accomplished mothers. The idea that women are compromised by motherhood has become ingrained in us. It is woven into gender inequalities in the workplace, and we often see confirmation of the idea when, sleep deprived and overloaded, we forget things. An appointment, a word that should come to us easily, where we put our keys. Chalk it up to mommy brain. There is evidence that during pregnancy specifically, some women experience memory deficits, but these are generally small and temporary. They may be linked to poor sleep quality and depression. Also, let's note, I have yet to see a study focused on measuring average forgetfulness in new fathers who also can be depressed and sleep deprived. There is also evidence that we've been looking at the problem the wrong way. Pregnant rats experience memory deficits in late pregnancy too, and researchers have correlated those deficits with a trend toward reduced size of the hippocampus. But here's the thing. Motherhood is good for the rat brain over the long term, even neuroprotective. Rats who have more litters are protected from some of the detriments of stress on the brain. Later in life, they perform better on certain cognitive tests, and they show less age-related decline in middle age. Researchers are just starting to look more comprehensively at cognitive function in human mothers in the early postpartum period and over time, tailoring memory tests, for example, to have more parenting relevance and finding that postpartum participants perform well. Researchers also have used large databanks of brain imaging in the UK and Australia to compare the brains of people with kids and those without. They found fewer effects of aging among parents, or what some researchers call younger-looking brains. It actually makes sense that parenthood could be beneficial for our brains. Raising children requires us to constantly deal with new challenges, to change and change again. Couldn't it be that this is a kind of cognitive enrichment? Research in humans and in other animals suggests that it is. Maternal instinct is a myth. Maternal instinct is a comforting idea. It offers romance and peace, the promise of falling in love at first sight, and the certainty of natural order in the face of the unknown. Even if we have a sense that it isn't exactly scientifically accurate, it's hard to set aside entirely. As I started looking closely at the science of the parental brain, the same question came up for me over and over. Why aren't we already talking about the brain in New Parenthood? Apart from a standard checklist of symptoms about the baby blues or postpartum depression, it's almost entirely absent from prenatal education and the cultural conversation around what it means to become a parent. Why? Maybe it's because the narrative around maternal instinct, around a woman's essence as a caregiver, and the idea that this is a fixed and automatic trait, like a switch that flips once baby arrives, is so powerful. It feels like science. It's not science. Rather, the notion of maternal instinct is rooted in religious ideas of motherhood and womanhood, written into scientific theory in the early part of the 20th century by men who cloaked those beliefs in science. The theory of evolution had torn down the wall between humans and animals, and so scientists started categorizing certain human behaviors, those deemed to be fixed patterns of behavior across the species, as instincts, as they had done with other animals. The parental instinct, strongest in women, was one of them. Prominent psychologist William McDougall wrote in 1908 that the instinct to protect and nurture her children and the tender emotion required becomes the constant and all-absorbing occupation of the mother. It is an instinct stronger than any other, he wrote, even fear itself. Not, however, stronger than education. McDougall wrote that parental instinct declined with education, a good reason, he suggested, for preserving gender norms of the day when women were clamoring for entry into educational institutions. McDougall was also a notable eugenicist. To him, preserving the maternal instinct among white, well-off women was closely related to protecting white supremacy. Some early feminists pushed back against the idea of maternal instinct from the moment it entered public discourse, but it held on. Partly, I think, because of the long line of scientists who found new ways of categorizing maternal behavior and especially maternal love as instinctual, and partly because of confirmation bias. We feel changed by parenthood. We see people we know changed by it. If not through instinct, then what? The changes that a person goes through in new parenthood are dramatic and profound and long-lasting. They are not a fixed pattern of behavior. They develop over time out of the brains we already have, with all the strengths and challenges that come with it, and they are not distinctly female. The idea of maternal instinct is harmful. It sets new mothers up with unreasonable expectations of themselves and can be an obstacle to them seeking support when they need it, afraid that their struggle during this incredibly tumultuous time is a sign that something in them is broken. It undermines efforts to create federal policies that actually support young families, including full access to reproductive health. It fuels discrimination against families that do not consist of one woman and one man, and it keeps us from looking fully at all the ways that parenthood shapes us, including our physical and mental health, over the long term. The science of the parental brain offers a new story.
Thank you, Chelsea. Okay, that's our show for the day, everyone. If you got something out of it, please leave a rating or review in your podcast player so others can find it too. And go to nextbigideaclub.com to find out about our hardback subscription club. That's where we send you the best new nonfiction books as selected by our curators Malcolm Gladwell, Adam Grant, Susan Cain, and Daniel Pink. Check it out at nextbigideaclub.com. I'm Michael Kovnat. See you tomorrow.